guys, welcome back to my personal YouTube channel. This is Tiare Gattimora and I want to chill with you and today tell you about why it is quite stupid to want to abolish the family. So I want to start by going back to an event that I attended around the end of 2022, which quite honestly was the most depressing event I have ever attended in terms of left-wing ones, and it was about the abolishing of the family and housing. So let's get into it. This group of women were talking about this housing co-op that they had established in sort of the outskirts of Barcelona, and they basically sold it as this sort of like feminist housing co-op where they all owned it and they lived this very like common lives. Like they had a lot of cooperation between them. There weren't like clear-cut families, like nuclear families, and basically what they said is it was a feminist project and the people there were feminists, and just for starters that sounded to me like it was quite a means-tested project, which just to begin with I do not like a priori. I think we should aim for the opposite of that. I think we should bring forth universalist projects. I really wonder what their idea of feminism is, because I'm a feminist, but that doesn't necessarily mean me and them would share the same ideas about what that means and what kind of feminism we stand for. And so I wondered, like how many people must have like gotten cancelled here to begin with, and what does that mean? Like, are you saying if you're not a feminist, you don't deserve housing? I think housing should be a given for anyone and everyone. It should be the opposite of mean tested. It should be guaranteed and it should be universal. And so just to begin with, that sort of turned me off. And then they brought it together with the idea of abolishing the family and basically living all together in this sort of very like communal space, even within the most sort of private spheres of life. So your home, right? And like raising your children, basically like completely like taking down any sort of barriers. And at the end of the event, this group of women basically started making comments on what had led them to live there and also to not have kids. So they would have been in their late 40s and they didn't have children. And they basically said, sometimes it's not that we just didn't want children, it's that because of how life unfolded, we didn't get to have them. And by that point, I just, to me, that was one of the most depressing moments of my left-wing sort of involvement ever, because I just thought, then why have you been, if you're actually feeling regret about this, and this is something you would have actually honestly wanted, then why have you been sitting here telling us how cool it is to just, blend all sort of relationships, and, stay away from the sort of more like biological ties and like having children and like the nuclear family and whatever. Why have you been sitting here for an hour telling us to get away from that when it turns out you regret not having it? Thanks. Great. And I don't know, that just felt like a case of I didn't get to have it, therefore I'm trying to turn it around into, well, then it means I have a more lefty life, don't I? And I'm actually in the fight more than you guys would be if you actually go on to have kids, now that you can. And it just felt like their idea of a lefty existence would very much be an isolated one, in terms of like, yeah, we have our own community, but yeah, we are a feminist one, so we are like a selected group of people, and we are, in a co-op away from the state. We don't rely on it. I even asked, like, what about Red Vienna? Because, it was supposed to be a housing event, and I wanted to learn more, hopefully, about Red Vienna, and how the working class use the state to basically have housing for everyone, and for social housing to not be like an ugly last resort, but actually a comfortable, beautiful, secure way of living, way of housing. And they literally didn't know what it was. Like, literally didn't know what it was. And actually one of them, an indigenous lady, kind of told me off, because she was like, your state is not the good daddy state that can help us. It has been the enemy for us historically. And I just thought, these people are clearly anti-enlightenment. They're thinking in, intersectional terms. They're not thinking, how can the working class create universal programs using the state? Basically, we're coming from totally different standpoints. And I not only found it depressing, I found it counterproductive, if not a little cruel, because, for me, like, I was 26 and I really wanted to have a family of my own. I still do. I still hope for that every day. And, getting told basically that's not a very feminist thing to want, instead of, hey, what are the material conditions that are making it harder for me to get this? And how can you, basically what can you do in your own life right now with what you have to bring yourself closer to that goal? Instead of that, it was like, nah, it's actually not a good idea. It's not cool. That was devastating for someone in my position. And basically I, I think it was shortly before, I had read this article, this interview to Jennifer Aniston, new convert, just dropped. Basically, she had said that she very much had wanted to be a mother, and that she would have given anything for someone to say to her, freeze your eggs while there was still time. And that really woke me up. I was like, oh, this happened to her really young, so even though I'm in my 20s, I'm already going to get checked. And I mean, turns out everything looked fine. But, if it hadn't, which for a few of my friends, it didn't actually, if I had been one of them, then that means I could have had a better chance of, freezing my eggs, if I could afford to, like, actually do something, like, know my timeline, act upon it. And I find it pretty sad that someone who is not, part of a left project, or not necessarily like a feminist icon or whatever, was more helpful to me, and I'm sure to many more young women, than women who were supposedly on the left and that, like, should have been in solidarity with us and, actually, like, cared about, like, our futures. Just felt entirely depressing. And so, to comment further on this idea of, abolishing the family, which I once thought I agreed with, and then upon doing, further, like, research, listening to more people, actually sitting down and thinking about it, and, asking myself, like, what do I actually want? Like, holy, like, I've always wanted a family. What am I even, like, talking about here? This is crucially important to me. Basically, I wanna take you through a couple of pieces. This one is called In Pursuit of the Family by Dustin Wastella on Damage Magazine. And I'm gonna read from it because, I wanna go through what do people actually want. What do they actually want as a majority? And basically, Dustin says, most young people today want to get married and have kids, and people increasingly prefer larger families to smaller ones. Families make illness less painful, death less lonely, and life more meaningful. There is ample evidence that family life is rewarding in and of itself. Survey data from the GSS show that the most consistently happy people are those married with children. This result holds even among working class respondents, despite assumptions that the cost of children would outweigh their benefit. Meanwhile, the stability of a two-parent household arrangement has long been recognized by psychologists and sociologists as the best way to raise happy and well-adjusted children. And despite the burdens posed by a vicious labor market, stagnant wages, and almost no state-sponsored help for raising kids, a staggering 87% of American mothers and fathers rate being a parent as the most or one of the most important aspects of who they are. Families still offer that haven in a heartless world. And here referencing Christopher Lasch, whose book, Haven in a Heartless World, I am reading, but will try to go deeper into only when I have actually finished it, which I haven't yet. And so, but he discusses a lot of the topics that I'm gonna touch upon today. So basically this is to say, according to data, most people still want families, and they want numerous ones. Like they want more than one kid. They want, a larger sort of familial network. And there's data for it. I'm gonna leave this and every piece I mention here down in the description below. And I also want to cite my own article for Atlante Editoriale from a couple of years ago, in which I said, in Southern Europe, data tells us there will be less and less couples with children. By 2041, 1 in 4 families will be a couple with children. More than 1 in 5 will never have them. And women would prefer to have an average of 2 children as opposed to the average 1.2 they actually have. Turns out, even though abortion is the topic that gets talked about the most by sort of professional managerial class feminists from older generations and even from our own, to be honest, turns out we don't want less children, we want more than we're actually having. And that doesn't mean abortion is not important, it just means I find it quite interesting that it's the topic that is most talked about, even though there is a larger problem in the realm of having less children than we would like to. I think it's really important to look at the numbers, basically, and what people genuinely want, not what some downwardly mobile graduates and their grievances actually tell us we should not want. But, and I'm gonna continue on the Wastella article here, as Mark Fisher noted in 2010, family ties are unsustainable today. It's not just that the stress of conditions of permanent instability make it more difficult for parents to stick together and raise children, it's also that the sociability engendered by those conditions makes it difficult to even want families. The values that family life depends upon, obligation, trustworthiness, commitment, are precisely those which are held to be obsolete in the new capitalism. As Theodore Adorno recognized, thanks to the market, the negation of the family gains the real upper hand. Capitalism needs no help abolishing families. Exactly. This is exactly the case as I brought up in my other videos. when the material conditions are fundamentally unstable housing, unstable jobs, unstable relationships, a high demand for constant displacement, and added to that is a sort of like social approach that sort of narrates that, you know, families are outdated, they're backwards, they're right wing, and so are sort of more stable relationships. That combination just makes it a battle to even admit to the fact that you do want children. It makes it harder to have material conditions that allow for it in a relaxed way, and also to find someone who also wants them. So, you know, it's just a cocktail for family being abolished by capitalism. It's not these activists that are, you know, actually accomplishing much. They're just, you know, making the left seem honestly unhinged and completely juvenile. It's that capitalism is just doing that work. It is. Look, I mean, again, look at the numbers. And that ties with this illusion, right, of like endless choice, of choosing partners not based on the genuinely irrational, you know, biological desires, or like lightning that like you get struck by when you meet someone you actually like. It's more about filling in a form, you know, and seeking the expert help of, you know, what are the red flags, what are the green flags, let me find the best possible on paper partner. And I'm gonna go to another Damage article by Amber Trotter, where she discusses the, you know, freezing your eggs and like the good sides of that, but also the bad sides. And she says that we attempt to control experience at the expense of living it, losses, regrets, and messes included. Modern women often feel especially pressured to have or be it all. So perhaps women are especially prone to want it all, to be seduced by the illusion of limitless optionality, the tyranny of infinite choice for the right price. So basically, a part of being able to freeze your eggs is, yeah, you do have more time, but then the way that we go about choosing partners in itself is also a part of this, you know, world where, for instance, yeah, parenting is so hard because you're basically not, it's not just a family, it's a professional making factory. Like, you're basically told to create the next generation of like professionals. All responsibility is put on the shoulders of families to, you know, psychologically create the perfect subject, rather than actually recognizing that in the current system, no matter how hard you work at creating this perfect subject, you are still entering a system that is in fact a dead end, and where most people are in fact going to struggle. And, you know, hence the responsibility doesn't lie on, you know, just families and their psychological work at home. It's a much wider, harder to solve problem. And to that, I want to add from The Folly of Abolish the Family on Ashley Frawley's channel, an interview with Professor of Sociology Ellie Lee. Ashley says, it's amazing that a lot of these people at the extreme end see themselves as following in a kind of communist tradition, and they quote the Communist Manifesto endlessly. And yet, they will completely disregard the entire economic analysis that animates that whole point of view, which is to say that you can't blame human behavior and stupidity and greed and so on for the problems of capitalism, but that they are embedded in the system, that even if you act rationally, you will still have the same problems. So Marx presupposes the same rational subject as the classical economists. He doesn't need to bring in stupid people who raise their children improperly. It's the system itself, right? Because it's not about how families are acting in their private lives that determines, you know, someone's fate, at least not to the extent that it's being presented, is the world those kids, when they grow up, actually go into, and the fact that that family itself might have been quite secluded from that world because the social atomization is so profound that unless you make an active effort, you are pretty much isolated, right? And here's the thing. We are basically doing it all wrong. We're doing it the opposite way around as it should be, because we are placing this extreme pathologizing, psychologizing, rationalizing of private, personal, and family life. But then where the actual politics are, which by the way, we are told, no, all the politics are in that private life. Therefore, of course, you're gonna, you know, make it super political and rationalize it, etc. For actual politics, we are making them entirely emotional. We are, you know, imagining this irrational, feminized, victimized subject as the center of it, if there's a center at all. And we are, you know, making them all about those private parts of our lives, instead of, you know, saying, no, we are dealing with a working class that is composed of rational subjects here who are going to struggle for their material interests. That's out of the window. Now it's like, let's rationalize and like make our private lives more politically correct, if you will, more like the more as feminist as possible. Like, who do you date? Who are your friends? What do you do with your, you know, personal and even sexual lives, rather than what material conditions are women living under? Yeah, basically I think that's getting it, yeah, the opposite way around as we should. Basically getting it all wrong. And that's not to say there's no politics in personal lives. It's just to say it's literally like an almost insulting way of denying the irrational, more biological, more instinctual parts of ourselves, and doing the opposite to our political lives. So instead of recognizing our wish for a more materially lush and abundant existence, actually telling us, oh no, you should cut your consumption because you're in the global north, so for the climate doesn't add up. That's literally like the exact opposite way around as it should be, in my opinion. Which also connects to the fact that professional women preach the abolishment of the family, but then, as I observe them, the wealthier people are, the more they are getting married and having kids. And then in poorer regions, such as the one I live in, Southern Europe, we are really struggling to do that. And I wanna actually continue with a talk, I think connected to the article I cited before, which is titled, you can find it on YouTube as well, Family Trouble Damage Issue 3 Launch, featuring Catherine Liu and Dustin Guastella. So they say that basically, yes, better material conditions tend to see family growth, which, by the way, kind of implies that more left-wing led contexts do foster more family, not less family, and that if, when given the choice, people do tend to choose to have a family. Isn't that interesting? Basically, they say the statistics have shown that the rate of divorce of college-educated women is on a delta to 0, and for non-college educated women, they're having more children out of wedlock, their marriages end in divorce, they have extremely destabilized lives. So it's like elite women are abolishing the family when capitalism has abolished the family for working class women already, right? Like, it's absolutely insulting to me. Just this idea that you're going out there sort of campaigning for this, and actually the system that you claim to oppose has actually done the job for you. It's kind of devastating. And has done the work for you for the women who you claim you want to save, which just shows how fucked up it is that there's actually people wanting to save other people and claiming that's being a leftist, when being a leftist should be about self-agency, shouldn't it? Dustin says, back in Dickens's time, for instance, they said that public schools were going to destroy the family. History is quite the opposite. Public schools actually enabled better and stronger family growth because they created better conditions for able children. And as public schools grew, now today I'm sure there are many conservatives in the homeschooling movement who still believe this idea. But for the most part, people have come to understand that public provisions of certain social goods do not necessarily threaten family life. I think the same way about a lot of policies that we would consider pro-family. He continues, we need to show that throughout history, we've seen these steps of progress, and some of them have resulted in greater, stronger, better family lives. Others have resulted in the dissolution of family life. We have to figure out which policies actually work. And I love that because, yes, it is about discerning, saying, okay, which policies are giving us better material conditions that prompt, that, foster a more flourishing, a more meaningful, happier, etc. family life, and which ones are actually a bunch of experts trying to get into bed with us and, telling us what we should and shouldn't do, and putting all responsibility on families' shoulders rather than, the state or the organization of the economy, which is where it mostly should be. I think that's a great point, and I want to add from Catherine Liu in this talk. She says there's a fantasy in this neolibertarian trad family that the family is pure and that the state and the outside influence is impure. That's a position of defensiveness that only creates problems. That's a very fucked up family if you think that you can't be porous with regards to the outside world. And I think this could not be more important. Like, just as we are, floating offshore away from everything in this atomized situation, families can also be that. And, mine certainly was. And to me, that was the worst part about it. And it goes together with this idea that I also mentioned in my previous videos of, basically retiring from Western civil life, which to me is a great characteristic of the current, the current context. It's something that dominates it. It's to the point where leftists overwhelmingly think the West is actually the bad guy, historically so. If there's any history, that's the history, so we better get away from it. So instead of having that connection to the past, that vision for the future, that socially integrated present with, a class project, a national project, we just are anti any of that. And we have, basically de facto retired from Western civil life, and that applies to the family also. So it's not just that there are less families, but the ones that there are, I definitely can see this trend of, whether they're right-wingers or left-wingers who just think their society is inherently white supremacist and evil, they are staying away from civil life. And just as unions and parties have emptied out, so have families. So all of these institutions, of the working class are just nowhere to be found. And if they're anywhere, they're not of the working class or for the working class. And that's kind of the problem we're facing, isn't it? And I want to say, you know, even if your family hasn't been great, I'm with you. I just, you know, think that that doesn't need to mean you don't want one. I remember calling one of my close friends my sister, and my mom telling me like, well, you don't really like your sister, so it's kind of ironic that you call your friend your sister. And I was like, the fact that I didn't like have a great relationship with my sister doesn't mean I wouldn't have loved to. Like, you know, the fact that I didn't really like get along with my like more nuclear family doesn't mean I don't want one. On the opposite, I think we should keep the faith and keep the hope that we can build something better, you know, and that also comes from acknowledging that part of the problem. A big part of the problem was the context that our families took place in, you know, and create a context where ours can have a better chance of flourishing. And so, yeah, instead of fully renouncing it, why not try to make our own? And it doesn't need to be, by the way, it doesn't need to be just having children. Like, families can be different than that, hopefully larger than that. And by the way, notice if you're thinking, oh, she's defending the traditional family. Am I? I said family, you said traditional and heterosexual. I say class, you say white. Think about that. I want to end by reading that first Guastella article in Damage. This is how he starts it, because I do want to freak you out. I do want to remind you, atomization, not good. In the late 90s, a Japanese retiree moved into one of Tokyo's sprawling public housing complexes alongside thousands of other aging residents. His modest pension was supplemented by his life savings. His rent and other bills were deducted automatically from his bank account. One day, his funds ran out. The rent payments stopped. Officials came looking for the delinquent tenant. They entered his apartment only to find his maggot-pig skeleton next to the door. His corpse rotted there for 3 years. No one knew he had died. Very few people, it seemed, even knew he was alive. This year, some 68,000 people in Japan will die completely and utterly alone. So alone that many of them won't be discovered until long after they're gone. The phenomenon is so common, it has a name: Kotukushi, the lonely death. The rise and persistence of Kotukushi is one of the more disturbing signs of crisis in Japan, where birth rates remain stubbornly below replacement level and where the elderly increasingly live in fixed income public housing ghettos devoid of youth. Doesn't sound great. Can we please allow people to want what they want? Can we please realize what we're rationalizing and why? Can we even allow ourselves to say something is unfortunate? You know, it's not interesting or ironic that a woman might want a family but not be in a stable relationship yet. No, it's just unfortunate. Can we like say that, and can we actually analyze why that might be happening, contextually speaking, and get up, work, and change it. Organize, basically. This is it for today. I think this should be talked about more. I think we should have more guts and actually say enough of lying to ourselves. What do we really want? If what we want is the harder thing to get right now, that means we have more work to do. Let's get to it. Let's figure out why, how. Let's look back into history and let's actually try to look into a future that isn't cancelled and where there are legacies and children to take them forth. So yeah, this is it for today. Pretty devastating topic to me. I will be back soon. Please like this video if you did. Please subscribe, and I'll see you on here.